Red Devil. Slightly different video today, as we will be doing a reaction to Gary Neville's interview on the overlap with Jim Ratcliffe. Before we get into that though, I want you to get in the comment section and let me know your thoughts on the interview. I assume everyone has watched it by now. Obviously it's on the overlaps page if you haven't. There's also an interview with the BBC which got released at the same time, so we're going to react to both of them. Two completely different interviews, both with Jim Ratcliffe, both released on Monday the 10th of March. Don't forget to drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and let's get straight on into it then, shall we? So I'm trying to think of the words to describe this interview. There were points that I thought it was good, and there were points that I thought it was bad. So I don't think it was the best interview, but I think it's better than nothing. What I will say is, the one overriding feeling I get from listening to Jim Ratcliffe is that it doesn't really sound like he knows what he's talking about in relation to football. Business, obviously he's massively successful. He's one of the richest British businessmen, isn't he? He's a billionaire. His Ineos company have made tons of money in chemicals, remember. Let's just put this into context. It's not like he used to run a football club. He still does run a chemical company. So in chemicals, he's one of the top players. But in relation to football, I just think he just doesn't really understand. There was one point where Gary Neville asks him about the £40,000 that they're removing from the players' charity trust, you know, for the ex-players. And Gary says, why did you not just do some sort of dinner where Bruno Fernandes or Maguire or one of the senior players goes, you sell tickets for £100, you know, you could make 40 grand easily. And he was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, I don't know. Like, what's going on in this boardroom? We have Omar Barada, we have Dave Brailsford, we have Jason Wilcox, we have Jim Ratcliffe. These are the people making the decisions at the top of the club. And the fact that they hadn't even thought of something so simple as that, it completely baffles me. They've managed to work out how to put the ticket prices up. They've managed to work out how to fire lots of people, but they don't seem to be able to actually be generating more money off the club. Their method of generating more money is to get rid of people and to put the costs onto the fans. Whereas, you know, if you put a ticket up for £100 for a gala dinner and all the money's going to charity, I don't think anybody would complain, because people would be like, it's going to charity, why not? Let's do it. Some may even argue that why are we even having this conversation? They should just be paying the money anyway. But to think that they hadn't even thought of things like this. And, you know, and Gary says, was it not like mentioned to the players that they could put some money towards it? Casemiro's on 350k a week, and this charity used to receive 40,000 a year. If each player in that squad put £100 a week in, that would probably cover it. £100 of their 350 grand salary. Jadon Sancho, we still pay half of his salary, and he doesn't even play for Manchester United. Like, I just don't understand how they haven't thought of these things. They're ruthless when it comes to firing people. They're ruthless when it comes to putting the ticket prices up, and they don't care what the fans think. But when it comes to simple basic decisions or simple basic ways of trying to generate money that aren't just fire everybody, they don't really seem to understand how to do it. Let's go through some of the other things that Jim Ratcliffe said, though, because there's lots and lots of other stuff that was talked about. There is some breaking news as well whilst we're live, actually, quickly. So apparently Manchester United have just announced that they are going to build a 100,000 capacity stadium. And you know what? This is really clever from Manchester United. They get the Manchester United owner, Jim Ratcliffe, to do an interview the day before to try and calm the fans down, to try and settle the fan base, to try and stop the protest. They probably thought, you know, we'll do this interview with Gary Neville, ex-Manchester United player, legend of the club, and everything will be all right. And then the next morning, they announce that there's a new stadium coming. This is coming out from The Athletic. So it's very clever. It's very formulated. They wouldn't have done the interview otherwise. They only did it because they wanted to announce this new stadium today, which is obviously going to cause upset in the fan base. Some people don't want the new stadium. But the headline is this, that Manchester United have decided to build a new 100,000 capacity stadium. The decision is final. This is from The Athletic. So anybody who wanted Old Trafford to remain, it's not going to happen. The new stadium has just been announced. How does everyone feel about that? I mean, we'll obviously continue talking about the interview, but How do you feel with this news this morning that there is going to be a new stadium? It will be 100,000 people. Crazy. As I said, 100%. The only reason they did the interview was because of this news story today that they're going to do the new stadium. What else have we got in there? To see what people are saying in the chat. Ellen says that she liked the interview. I enjoyed the interview as well, generally. I thought it was interesting to get a bit more of an insight and to get more stuff put out there as a fact. Like, for example, people always say that Erik ten Hag wasted all the money, when really Jim Ratcliffe said that there was 5 or 6 people who made the decision to sign the players that we did each time. So that whole narrative that Erik ten Hag is at fault for everything can kind of just be put to bed now. What else did I like? Let's try and bring some positives. What did I like about the interview? I liked that Gary Neville pushed him on the Glazers, but obviously Jim Ratcliffe can't really say much. Gary said, why have you not asked them to just repay the debts that they've taken against the club, pay the dividends back? And Jim Ratcliffe effectively said, well, it's not my money. I can't tell them what to do. I'm sure he would love for them to remove all the debt because that would make the situation much better at Manchester United, but he's obviously not going to say that. He's done a deal with the Glazers. He's in bed with them. He's not going to start slagging them off on the internet, is he, on a video with Gary Neville? So the question was good from Gary, but I don't think he really could have expected a response that was going to be, controversial, saying, yes, they need to pay back the debt. They're not going to do that. We know that. There is also this narrative as well from some people that I've seen quite a lot this morning on Twitter. People saying that Jim Ratcliffe saved the Glazers. And I did kind of agree with that for a while, but the more I think about it now, the Glazers never wanted to sell Manchester United 100%, as in full sale. That's clear. And if they hadn't have sold to Jim Ratcliffe, Sheikh Jassim wanted to buy 100%. That was widely reported. He didn't want to go in 50-50. He didn't want 10. He didn't want 20. He wanted 100 or nothing. So that wouldn't have been an option. We couldn't have had part ownership by Sheikh Jassim. And there's this whole narrative that, if Jim Ratcliffe hadn't have come along, then the Glazers would have had to sell 100%. But I did agree with that at the beginning. But the more I've let the kind of dust settle and the more I've thought about it, they would have just got investment from a bank, from someone else. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a strange one, isn't it? And I'm not saying that makes it all right that they've got into bed with them whatsoever. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we kind of attach ourselves to this whole narrative that, the Glazers would have been gone if it wasn't for Jim Ratcliffe. And maybe they would have. I don't know. And I'm not defending Jim Ratcliffe here. I'm just saying that if it wasn't Jim Ratcliffe, it would have been someone else anyway, probably. So, yeah. But let's crack on with the rest of the interview because there's so much to get into on this interview. He talks about players as well. I thought this was interesting. He effectively threw Casemiro, Antony, Sancho, a couple of other players under the bus, which I thought was quite strange. I don't know how everybody thought about that bit of the interview. He said that effectively this summer we've got to pay still for all of these other players, which was pretty crazy. We've got to pay, I think, 17 million for Antony, 17 million for Casemiro, etc. And yeah, that did kind of shock me a little bit because people seem to think, every year, we need to spend 100 million. And I think he said our transfer fees for this summer from old deals is about 89 million pounds, which is mental. So all of these players who, let's be honest, haven't really worked at Manchester United, we're going to have to pay about 80 million pounds on those players alone, which is crazy. Absolutely crazy. He also did one with the BBC as well, which I thought was quite interesting. And the BBC interview was a lot more stripped back. It was a lot more less emotional than the Gary Neville one, but it was still going down the same direction. And the overriding message from Gary Neville is that... Sorry, the overriding message from Jim Ratcliffe is that the situation will get better, and this is just a temporary thing. Only time will tell. I mean, if you look at it on a very basic level, they are cutting costs left, right, and centre. So financially, we should get better. But the risk that we have is if we don't have European football for a while, we get less money from sponsorships. We get less money from TV revenue, less money from matchday revenue. So even if we start bringing down costs, right, which is great, fine, whatever, if you agree or disagree, our costs start coming down. But our revenue's also coming down because we're not playing in the Champions League. So I almost feel like it's almost just going to cancel each other out. That's how I see it. But yeah. Kieran says Sheikh Jassim couldn't prove that he had the funds. Yeah, I think we still hang on to this whole narrative that Sheikh Jassim was the answer. And I agree, full sale, that's what we wanted. But the fact of the matter is the Glazers didn't have to sell. Jim says, they would have run out of money. They would have just taken out more debt. They're not going to run out of money. Like it's this whole thing, right? Where Jim Ratcliffe is kind of clinging onto this narrative that if it wasn't for him, Manchester United would have gone bankrupt. Melvin says 2 friends about to make millions from the regeneration project having an interview together. I mean, that's a fair point. You do have to question the legitimacy and the agendas behind that interview, because as Melvin says, these 2 guys are working together in business at the moment, remember. Gary Neville is part of the regeneration project. He has a hotel. If you've ever been to Old Trafford, his hotel is 50 metres away from the stadium, and I'm sure that he'll be having other businesses and stuff pop up around Old Trafford. So Gary is set to make serious money from this regeneration project. So he is, I mean, I like Gary Neville. I think he's a good pundit. I like the overlap. But if you really think about it, he is in bed with the Glazers and Jim Ratcliffe. Obviously, he calls out the Glazers, but he's still working with them to do this new generation stadium because obviously he wants to have a piece of the pie. Ranjit says they should have asked if he's ever going to own Manchester United in full. Remember that some questions would have been off the cards, and that question obviously is off the cards. It's not been mentioned again since pre-takeover. I don't think he will ever, to be honest. The Glazers like it as their vanity ego thing, don't they? It makes them feel special, it makes them feel important. And it makes them a lot of money as well. So, yeah. Al says 4 of the 6 Glazer siblings wanted a full sale. There was a lot of pressure to sell. Ineos gave them a lifeline. But the thing is, Al, right, I get what you're saying, yeah? But they could have just gone to any investment bank in America and said, would you like to buy 29% of Manchester United for 300 million? And they'd say, yeah, here's the money. And it would have been done, you know? Or they could have just borrowed more money from a bank against... Actually, no, you can't borrow it against the club anymore. I'm not sure if they would have been able to borrow more money against the club. Probably not. Sino says Jim Ratcliffe said they won't be selling young talents to bring transfer funds in, but we're tight with PSR. I wonder what the summer window will look like. I think the summer window is going to be like signing young, cheap players. I think the whole narrative will be that we need to save pounds over the next few years and we need to get back into it. Because the whole way through this interview, he's going on about how he wants Manchester United to make profit every year, which we don't. Usually, we're always kind of on the cusp. We might make a little bit. He wants to make it profitable, right? So that's effectively saying that money that could be spent on transfers, he wants to keep because he wants to make Manchester United profitable, you know? Which in the long run, I think obviously does make sense. You want your business to be stable and your club to be stable. But in the short term, if we drop out of the Champions League for the next 5 years and then we become a mid-table club, it's very difficult to get back from mid-table to top 4 without spending loads of money. And they're clearly not going to do that. So I agree somewhat that we want to get our finances back in order. But at the same time, you still need to be in the Champions League. You still need to be, at that top level. So, yeah. But I thought it was an all right interview. As somebody said earlier on in the chat, the fact that it's 2 people working in business together, Jim Ratcliffe and Gary Neville, you have to question the legitimacy and whether it's a bias interview. But other than that, I mean, it's better than nothing. Is that all right to say? It's better than nothing, I guess. yeah, I don't know. There isn't really that much more to say on it. I know some people are very, very upset about it. I've seen people on Twitter going crazy. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what the kind of aftermath is. But what I will say is this: I think it's incredibly, what's the word? I think it's incredibly coincidental that this morning we have a story now that this morning that the new stadium is going ahead, and it now kind of makes you understand why they put that story out yesterday. They put out 2 interviews. He did an interview with the BBC, and he did an interview with Gary Neville, obviously. And it was obviously recorded a little while ago because he's referring to the Fulham game. And I'm not sure whether it was the Fulham game at Craven Cottage or the Fulham game at Old Trafford. I feel like it might have been the game at Craven Cottage, to be honest, which was like a month ago. So this interview was obviously recorded a long time ago. And they probably said to them, we'll tell you exactly when you're allowed to release it, right? And they must have decided that we'll announce it as soon as the story comes out about the new stadium. So there's a little bit of positivity. There's a little bit of like, here's the owner speaking to the fans. He's a man of the people. But really, when you think about it, as I just said, this interview was recorded a while ago. And they've just held it. They've held it in the back, waiting until they need a bit of good PR. They've just had a protest. And then up the interview goes. And do you think that's a coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. Not in the slightest. You have protests on Sunday, Monday evening. An interview that was clearly recorded a long time ago gets released on both the BBC. 2 different interviews, both with the owner of Manchester United. And then the next morning you find out there's a new stadium. Very, very well calculated, but obviously once you see through it, there'll be some people who watch it who don't think like that. They'll probably think, oh, it was recorded this afternoon. He wants to speak to the fans. Somebody says, mention the Arsenal game. Maybe, did he mention the Arsenal game? You're right, actually, he did. Either way, even if it was recorded straight after the Arsenal game, it was obviously planned that they knew there was going to be a protest on Sunday. They knew that they were going to announce a new stadium on Tuesday. Let's put out an interview on Monday to try and spin some positive PR. So whichever way you look at it, whether it was recorded today, yesterday, or a month ago, someone says do a poll on whether you like Jim Ratcliffe. I assume most people don't like Jim Ratcliffe. Fred says, what's the stadium news? So the Athletic are reporting this morning that Manchester United will 100% build a new 100,000 capacity stadium. So that is official. Apparently it'll be announced later today. And it says, yeah, so the new stadium's coming. That was more the point I was making, right? Protests on the Sunday, Glazer's out. The next day you have an interview with the owner, and then the next day they announce a new stadium. That's what they've done here, and it's all just to try and spin some positive PR. But I'm going to leave it there. I think I've kind of covered all the topics. Thank you so much for watching this reaction video. It's a little bit different to normal, but hopefully you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to drop a like before you leave. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. This has been Daily with Devil, and I'll speak to you all a bit later. Bye for now, everyone. Have a good day.